Chapter 129, 7th Year, Instinct. You told him! Remus kissed Sirius as soon as they were alone. Well, he worked it out, Sirius said, laughing, as he was pushed backwards into their bedroom. Lily and James had to head to a prefect's meeting, and Peter was still in detention. Remus had dragged Sirius upstairs as fast as he could, all aches and pains forgotten. But you told him, Remus insisted, running his tongue up Sirius's neck, collarbone to earlobe. Sirius shuddered, and the backs of his knees hit the bed frame. Remus gave him a shove that was half urgent, half playful, and they fell back together. Merlin! Sirius gasped, as Remus continued his assault, climbing on top of him, a knee either side of Sirius's hips. If I'd have known this is how you'd respond, I'd have told Prongs ages ago. Shut up! Remus kissed him hard on the lips, hand on Sirius's belt. Sirius obeyed. Remus was a bit surprised too. Who'd have thought that confession was such a turn-on? If he wasn't careful, he'd be telling everyone he met. So, he said, half an hour later, sitting by the window in his boxers, lighting a cigarette. Sirius lay on the bed still, vaguely stunned and staring at him. It went well? Sirius blinked very slowly, as if his eyelids were heavy. Remus grinned, exhaling smoke, trying to aim it through the crack in the window. James, what did he say? I think the first thing was, what the fuck are you playing at? But it got better from there. Sirius snorted. Did he ask a lot of questions? Sort of. Nothing I didn't expect, I suppose. What about Evans? She said, oh my god, about 100 times, but she came around fairly quickly. Prongs too, except the Prat won't tell Wormtail for us, says we have to do it. Well, fair enough. Remus sucked on his cigarette again, then blew smoke around the room, watching it fill the space between them. What questions did he ask? Sirius closed his eyes, breathing in. Nothing scandalous. How long for? When did it start? Why didn't I tell him? That sort of thing. What'd you say? I told the truth. Roll as a fag. Remus already had. He held it out. Sirius rolled onto his stomach and reached his long pale arms through the smoke to take it, placed it between his pursed lips and snapped his fingers. He sucked, then rolled back, exhaling with a sigh. How'd you feel? Remus asked, unable to tear his eyes away. It still seemed miraculous beyond belief. Sirius Black, naked, in my bed. Right now? Bloomin' marvellous. Sirius winked wickedly. About Prongs? Okay. Good, I think. He stretched, hand disappearing under one of the pillows. What's this? Oh! Remus blushed, jumping up from the window. I got some letters back. Ferox is okay, and, Grant. Sirius's lips curled as he picked up the postcard Grant had sent from Brighton. It had a colour photo of the pier on the front. The sea looked blue, and the sun was shining. Remus was so glad he'd sent it. It was nice to picture Grant in a bright, cheerful place like that. Sirius continued smoking as he read it. He's seeing someone with a nice body, but he misses you. Remus jumped onto the bed and snatched the card away, raising it aloft so Sirius couldn't reach. He's seeing someone with a nice body, and he misses me. Separate statements. Well. Sirius folded his arms, lying back again, chest puffing out. I hope you're writing to him about my gorgeous body. Course. Remus laughed, laying back down beside him. They stared up at the red velvet bed curtains together. You're not really jealous, are you? Remus asked tentatively. Psst, no. Sirius nudged him gently with his elbow. Curious, maybe. About? What do you think? You and him. You never told me any detail. We were 15. There was no detail. Remus tutted. Honestly, what a thing to ask. James did. About us. He never. Well, okay, He didn't, but I knew he wanted to. No, he didn't. You're just being vain. Remus leaned over to stub out his cigarette in the cold cup of tea on his nightstand. Sirius caught him at the hip and pulled him over. Remus closed his eyes and let himself be pulled. Oh, thank Merlin I had the map. I would have gone straight to the library. Merlin's balls! The door flew open, and Peter stood gaping in the doorway, clapping his hands to his eyes. Remus leapt up from the bed as if Sirius was on fire, and began scrambling about for his trousers on the floor, shouting, Sorry, Pete! Sorry, Pete! Ah, shit! What the fuck? Peter shouted back, still covering his eyes. Sirius yanked the duvet up, staring at them both. Then burst out laughing. Wormy, we've got something to tell you. Friday the 20th of January, 1978. Peter took a little while to get used to it, but then they all did, really, even Remus and Sirius. They kept forgetting that the marauders knew, and they'd grown so used to consciously avoiding each other that they were oddly shy to show any sort of affection in front of the others. Of course, Remus kept reminding himself it was better to keep a low profile anyway. They still had the rest of the school to worry about. You could tell Christopher, though, Sirius said, as they left the library for the last time before the Hogsmeade trip. It was almost midnight, and they'd had to be chased out by Madam Pince, who wouldn't let them stay any longer, even when Lily and James had flashed their head girl and boy badges. Oh, now you remember his name, Remus yawned, clutching his books to his chest, really just for something to hold on to. I'm just saying. Sirius caught the yawn and covered his mouth, but continued speaking. He already knows half of it. No harm in telling him the rest. It's not really fair to let him keep pining away from you when there's not a chance in... Sirius Black! Are you jealous? Lily cackled, giggly with overtiredness. No. Sirius sniffed, nose in the air. I just don't want any misunderstandings. Well, if I survive tomorrow, then I'll think about it. Remus yawned again. That made everyone go quiet, and he regretted saying it. They walked back to the common room in solemn silence. Gryffindor Tower was peaceful and mostly empty. A few stray second years up past their curfew fled to their dorms as soon as they saw James and Lily, and the marauders took their usual seats by the fireplace. Remus settled into his armchair, and immediately returned to the book he had been reading before Pince had so rudely interrupted. Sirius flicked his wand at the kettle hanging over the fireplace, and Lily summoned some clean teacups from the cupboard. But still no one spoke until the water was boiled and the tea brewing in its pot. Moony, Sirius said softly. Put the book down, yeah? We've done so much already. Doesn't feel like enough, Remus replied, feeling prickly and irritable. I know I'm missing something. Everyone kept staring at him, and by now he didn't know whether it was because they were amazed or repulsed about the whole Sirius thing, or whether they were convinced he was about to run away and join the werewolves. It's loads, James said, now pouring the tea and handing Remus a saucer. Honestly, you know enough now to walk any defence against the dark arts exam. Might as well bunk off the rest of the year. This isn't an exam, Remus snapped. The cup and saucer shook in his hands, so he set it down on the arm of the chair. He had a feeling Sirius had noticed that, but hopefully no one else had. But, Moony, Peter slurped his own tea noisily. You've done this before, last year. Exactly, James nodded encouragingly. Remus sighed and said no more. What was the point? Whinging wasn't going to get him anywhere. He sipped his tea, willing his hand to stay steady. This was potentially the worst time of the month for a mission. He couldn't help thinking. Only 4 nights away from the full moon, and his magic felt stronger than usual, but also less predictable. He was restless, his skin crawling, his senses bare, and his mood hot. He knew he was forgetting something. He just knew. A dark feeling of foreboding that told him all the curses in the world would be no good. He stood up sharply, knocking the teacup off the armchair. Sirius was quick and stopped it mid-air with a flick of his wand. Remus ignored this. Going to bed, he said, cracking his knuckles. Okay, Moony, James nodded brightly. He glanced at Lily. Think we'll stay down here for a bit. Peter looked at Sirius, then at Remus with an expression of faint terror. Remus tutted. "It's okay, Wormtail. I really am just going to sleep. See you all tomorrow." He didn't sleep. His brain wouldn't let him. He hated Dumbledore, and he hated Greyback. He hated the war, and as the hours got smaller and smaller, he hated Peter too. He did not hate the other werewolf, though, the one who was not Greyback, just as he had not hated Livia, though she frightened him. The more Remus thought about what was ahead of him, the less sure he was about his preparedness. Yes, he knew more curses and hexes now than Regulus and Severus combined, probably. But the more he thought back to his encounter with Livia, the less useful those things seemed. Hadn't she said it herself? "You can wear that uniform and wave your silly stick, but you know that you have more in common with me than anyone in that castle." He knew she was stronger than him. She could hurt him if she wanted to, but she hadn't, not really. Instead, she remembered the pity he had felt immediately after their meeting. He remembered the desire to help her and his conversation with both Ferox and Dumbledore. As dawn broke, Remus lay wide awake, thinking at 1,000,000 miles an hour, his heart hammering and his stomach fizzing in anticipation. If he had to go to war, then fine. But this was his battle, and it would be on his terms. Saturday, the 21st of January, 1978. Breakfast that morning was a bleak affair. Remus was ravenously hungry, but no one else seemed to be eating. Sirius was on black coffee, and it was already making him jittery. He kept bobbing up and down in his seat. Mary and Marlene were the only ones acting halfway normal, because neither of them knew about the assignment. "3 broomsticks later?" Mary asked brightly. Lily and James nodded, trying to smile, and succeeding, but looking slightly deranged. They were holding hands under the table again, and Remus was trying not to think about it, instead reaching for the plate of bacon and another helping. "Can I bring Yaz?" Marlene was asking Mary. Mary raised an eyebrow. I suppose." "Great." Marlene grinned. Mary's mouth twisted, but she didn't say anything. The walk into Hogsmeade seemed longer than ever. Fortunately, Lily and James had duties to perform, so at least they weren't following Remus about, just waiting. Unfortunately, Sirius had enough nervous energy for 3 people, and Remus could feel it coming off him in waves. "Where should we go?" he murmured low enough so only Remus and Peter could hear. "Everywhere, I suppose." "Would it help if I was Padfoot?" "If you like." "Shall I change too?" Peter asked. "If you like." Remus was unable to summon up very much interest. He was too busy trying to work out whether or not Hogsmeade smelt genuinely different, or whether it was because he usually tried to ignore scents as a human. They ducked into a shop alleyway, and Peter and Sirius transformed behind some bins. Wormtail crawled onto Remus's palm, and he sat him on his shoulders. The weight was a small comfort, even if his whiskers tickled Remus's neck. Nice to have Padfoot too, big and black and excitable, trotting alongside like a loyal companion. Yeah, much better when your friends aren't human, in Remus's opinion. At least, right now. They walked. Remus deliberately avoided the high street. Instead, they were wandering the backs of the houses. How many people lived in Hogsmeade? How many were potentially in danger, without even knowing it? He tried sniffing the air, and it was like exercising a muscle he had allowed to atrophy. Some scents came through stronger than others. Padfoot, obviously, and Wormtail, household waste from the bins, compost from the back gardens, and magic, that heavy iron taste which settled on his tongue like treacle when he was this close to the moon. Other students, the sickly sweet aroma of honeydukes, and the comforting smell of parchment emanating from scriven shafts. The forest. He could smell the forest, if he really tried. He closed his eyes briefly and inhaled. Green, lush, dense, teeming with life and magic. At first, it seemed like an indulgent whim, just an idea that he rather liked the smell and wanted to get closer. But the further they walked and the closer they got, the more important it felt. Remus had the impression that something was been drawing him in this direction for some time now. The forbidden forest loomed large over the little village, miles and miles of darkness and danger, against a backdrop of blue-grey snow-capped mountains. For the first time, as a human anyway, Remus had the urge to go in, to explore. Padfoot whined beside him as they left Hogsmeade and the road behind them. He wondered if Sirius could smell it too, but it was impossible to get any kind of sense out of him in dog form. Remus tried to switch off his rational mind for a moment. Was there anything at all, or was he just overthinking? The magic in the forest wasn't the same as at Hogwarts. It wasn't human. It didn't have that metallic gunpowder smell Remus had become so accustomed to with most witches and wizards he knew. It was more organic, less precise, a heady, mulchy smell of soil and decay. There was power in there. He knew this much instinctively. Dizzying, huge, earth-moving power. It would have been frightening once, but the closer Remus grew, the surer he was. The power was his, if he wanted it. All he needed to do was let it in. Another scent revealed itself. An animal. Blood. Remus felt the wolf inside him stir, and his desire to enter the forest grew almost impossible to resist. Padfoot barked sharply and ran in front of him. The great black dog turned on Remus, raising its hackles and emitting a low growl. Remus blinked, snapping back into himself. Wormtail was squeaking and shivering on his shoulder. Maybe had been for a few minutes now. "Sirius." Remus frowned. "Move." Padfoot continued to growl. Wormtail gave another squeak before scuttling down Remus's robes into his left pocket. Remus felt hot and angry, as if something had been snatched from him that he wanted, that he needed. He made to move forward, and Sirius transformed back into himself. "Where are you going?" he said, still blocking Remus's way. "Can't you smell it?" Remus stopped trying to get past and caught Sirius's eye. "Can you?" he whispered, not quite believing it. "There's something bad in there. It must be the wolf." "It is." Remus nodded eagerly. Surely that was obvious. "I can't be sure, though." Sirius frowned. "I can," Remus replied. "Let me past." Sirius moved again, blocking him. "No," he said. "You've done what you said you'd do. We know it's there. Now, let's go back. Now." Remus stared over Sirius's shoulder into the dark. He wanted this so badly, more than he'd ever wanted anything. Well, except maybe the boy standing in before him. "I have to," he finished. It was an insufficient explanation, but it was all he had. "There you lot are! Where's Pete?" Sirius and James' deadlock was interrupted by James's cheerful sound. They both turned to see him striding towards them from the village, Lily at his side. "What are you doing all the way out here? Thought you were supposed to be trailing your scent all over town or something." "Yeah, we're just coming back now," Sirius said, which Remus thought was pretty cheeky, not to mention presumptuous. "You lot can," Remus said. "I'm not." "Not what?" Lily asked, confused. "Where is Peter?" Remus could feel the warm weight of Wormtail's furry little body in his pocket, but said nothing. James had been agonizing for months over whether to break the Anna Magnus thing to his girlfriend, and now was definitely not the right time. "I'm not coming back with you. I have to go in there." He pointed at the forest, aware of how mad he sounded. "You what?" James looked concerned. His eyes flicked to Sirius automatically, which only annoyed Remus even more. Sirius wasn't his keeper, for God's sake. "The wolf's in there," Sirius explained. "And Mooney's gone completely mental and decided he has to go in and face it right now." Remus's head snapped back to Sirius, outraged and betrayed. "I have not gone mental, you prick," he said fiercely. How could he explain that this was just what had to happen? He knew that, deep down, at his very core. "You lot go back, or wait here. You won't understand." "Help us understand, Remus." Lily came forward gently. "This isn't like you, barreling into a fight." Remus nearly laughed in her face. Did no one remember who he was? What he was? "I'm not going to fight anyone," he said. "I just want to talk to them. That's what I'm supposed to do." They were all staring at him unconvinced. His anger flared again, and he had a very unpleasant thought that he could very easily get past them if he wanted to. The magic in the forest was more than enough. It made him feel strong. He could force his friends to stay in place, and it wouldn't even tire him out. He probably wouldn't even need his wand. This notion burned so brightly it frightened him. He looked at Lily again, refusing to look at Sirius or James. "We were wrong. This isn't a battle, and I'm not a weapon against the werewolves," he tried to explain. I don't know. In a way, they need to know I don't mean any harm." "But Remus, if they're on you-know-whose side, they're not," he snapped. "Not all of them." Lily looked uncertain, and Sirius was practically burning a hole in the back of Remus's head with his indignance. Remus ran his hands through his hair. They weren't going to understand. How could they? He barely did. "Look," he said. "This is important, and I need you all to trust me." It wasn't a request, and nor was it received as one. James and Lily looked at each other, then at Sirius. James nodded. "Okay, Moony." Sirius made a noise of protest, but Remus was too far gone now to care. He would make it up to him later, when he could think clearly, when every instinct in him wasn't telling him to run into the forest at full pelt. "Okay," he nodded back. "Stay here." A tug in his midriff as the magic took over. He would never be sure whether or not he'd done it on purpose, and at the time, he simply did not care. He turned and began to walk into the forest quickly, his long legs making long strides, his friends behind him, unmoving, unable to follow. Chapter 130, 7th Year, Castor. It was easiest not to think, for the next few minutes at least. Remus did not slow down, or tire as quickly as usual. Even his hip had stopped hurting. Despite the wheedling guilt that he had to keep at bay, he had not felt so good in months. The scent grew stronger as the woods grew thicker, and the shade of darkness fell, casting strange shadows which seemed to move in the corners of Remus's eyes. He didn't think. It was too late to think. He was too far gone. "Bloody hell!" A voice in his head popped out of nowhere. "When you really go for it, you go for it, don't you, sweetheart?" Grant. Remus didn't want to do this now. "Shut up," he willed his brain. "Oh, charming," Grant's voice cackled. "Here I am, only trying to help." "Then I always try and help." "I don't need help." "If you didn't, I wouldn't be here," Grant's voice countered. "I could be someone else if you prefer. Lots of sensible people to choose from. I've got Ferox here, want to chat with him? Or Lily, though she's a bit whingy if you ask me. Dumbledore? Nah, bit of a prick. Ooh, how about your posh boy? Moony." "Shut up," Remus repeated, walking faster, breathing harder. "Yeah," Grant's voice agreed slyly. "I can see why you wouldn't want to talk to him, after what you just done." "I had to," Remus insisted. "None of you would understand." "Well, now they won't, you lunatic." Remus ignored the voice. There was no time for this. He would just have to deal with the consequences later. He knew there was no coming back from it now. Not really. "Hope you like the woods, Remus," Grant was whispering now. "'Cause no one's gonna want you back in civilization after that mess." "Shut up, shut up, shut up." Remus raged inside his own head, like a mad person, like someone deranged. Perhaps it had been a mistake, to go alone. Perhaps he really had lost it, and his friends were only trying to keep him safe. No, he caught the scent again, and it stirred up his insides so much that he felt as though he was being propelled by it, dragged forward, unable to resist. It was a feeling he had only ever associated with transformation before, and he had no more control over it in his human form than the wolf did. It was him, the other wolf, somewhere out there. Remus had to find him, or else, well, he wasn't sure, but it wasn't even worth considering. Something moved, just ahead, and Remus froze. The different scents of the forest began to pile up. He had to concentrate to identify and categorize each one. There was magic, and there was a different kind. It wasn't the wolf. It was female, or feminine at least, and not lupine at all. He walked towards it, confused. It was very close, but he couldn't see anything. He found himself in a grove of silver birches, spindly, ghostly white trees with papery bark that glowed in the darkness of the woods. The scent was strong, but still nothing, and he had lost the wolf's trail. Impatient, Remus pulled out his wand and cast a revealing spell. Parasium! His wand seemed to jump in his hand, the force of his magic so strong. An anguished wail filled the air, and the tree closest to Remus was no longer a tree, but a young woman. A dryad. She was beautiful in her own way, slender and tall as the trees she guarded. Her skin glowed as white as the silver bark, and her hair rustled with brittle leaves. She rounded on him, bearing sharp yellow teeth, and he staggered back, shocked and amazed. "Go away, nasty thing," she hissed, eyes narrowing. They were the colour of new spring leaves, unnaturally bright and fierce. "I dealt with the other. I'll deal with you too." "Which other?" "The other half-beast," she glowered. The dryad was at least a head taller than him, and advanced at a steady pace, roots unfurling from the soles of her feet and winding towards him. As dreadful and fearsome as she was, Remus had to stay focused on his goal. "I'm looking for him. The other. I mean you no harm. Or your trees." "Wizards do not belong here," she continued to scowl. "Even half-beast wizards. Get out." "I will, as soon as I've—" "Nasty, cruel, wicked creatures. Foul, unnatural. Don't belong. Too dangerous." "It's not a full moon," he insisted. "I'm not going to transform, I swear."
"Not wolf,"
she rasped, very close to him now, ivy and nettles winding their way towards him, covering his shoes.
"Wizard. Wolf is welcome. Wolf is natural."
"Oh." Remus didn't have a response to that, as the vines were tickling his ankles now, stinging him as they tightened. He still had his wand, and he still had every curse he'd spent the last 2 weeks practicing. But now the time had come to use them, and Remus's conscience prickled. The dryad was only doing what she was supposed to do, guarding her trees. "Please," Remus said, holding his hands up, hoping he looked defeated. "I promise I won't hurt you, or anyone. I just need to find the other wolf. Then I'll go, I really will."
"Lying, false-tongued, dirty,
I swear."
"And the little one?"
"What? Who?" Close up, he could see that her face was not smooth, like human skin, but finely lined and crackling, like bark. She gave another harsh wail and raised her hand. Remus flinched, but she didn't touch him. Instead, there was a violent shaking inside the robe pocket, and Wormtail came flying out, falling to the mulchy ground below with a soft pat. "Shit," Remus thought. "Bloody Peter." The dryad raised her arm again, and Peter transformed into his human shape, trembling and cowering on the ground. "Please don't hurt me," he whimpered, covering his face. Remus stepped in front of him quickly. Of all the people to have at your side in a situation like this.
"Liar!"
The dryad hissed again triumphantly, leafy hair bristling.
"Deceitful, filthy wizards."
She was raising both arms now, and her eyes had darkened to the colour of pine needles. Remus was now completely sure that she meant them serious harm. Even one of her pointed little teeth was showing. He couldn't disarm her. She didn't have a wand. He wasn't even sure if the usual defensive spells would work on her. Remus had just decided to use a knockback jinx to buy himself some time when... "Confringo!" Peter squeaked from behind him, pointing his stubby little wand over Remus's shoulder. "Oh, Jesus Christ," Remus thought, as he ducked reflexively. Fortunately, Peter was either so frightened or just inept that the blasting curse didn't have its usual devastating effect. Still, it was enough to cause some serious damage to the trees behind the dryad, setting a few leaves on fire. She screamed, a heart-wrenching, painful screech, and turned immediately to tend to the smoking branches. Peter and Remus took their chance and ran, vines snapping as they tore their feet from the ground. Peter followed Remus, but neither of them were especially fast runners, and by the time they judged it safe to stop, they were both wheezing heavily. "Bloody hell, Pete," Remus panted, bending forward, one arm against an oak for support. "I didn't know what to do," Peter replied, face red, pale hair plastered to his forehead. "Let's go back, Remus, please." He looked around anxiously. They were even deeper into the woods now, and other than their own laboured breathing, it was deathly quiet. Still, Remus shook his head, straightening up. "No," he said. "I have to find them. She hurt him." "So what?" Peter replied, indignant. "We're not supposed to be in here." "Look, I'm sorry you got caught up in this." Remus frowned impatiently. Now that they weren't in immediate danger, his desire to hunt the other wolf had returned. He could smell blood, he was sure of it. "But I have to. You can go back, if you want. Go and find the others." Peter looked behind him, then back at Remus, his eyes big and shimmering. On my own?" The tremor in his voice was palpable, and Remus suddenly wanted him gone more than anything in the world, in case the terror was catching. "I'll give you my watch, so you don't get lost," Remus offered. "No," Peter stiffened his lips. "I'll come with you." Peter's heartbeat was almost deafening, and Remus started to feel sorry for him. "It's okay," he whispered. "If something happens, you can just transform back and go and tell the others, can't you? You'll know the way back better as a rat." "I won't leave you, Remus," Peter whispered shakily. "I can be brave. I know I can." Remus squeezed his shoulder. "Fine. This way. Keep as quiet as you can." The dryad had not come after them, thank goodness. Remus couldn't remember everything about tree guardians, but he was fairly sure they couldn't leave their groves. Or maybe that was Nade's. He couldn't remember the difference. It didn't matter now. He'd picked up the scent properly, a mouth-watering rich iron tang that made his stomach growl shamefully. They were still days out from the full moon, but that didn't seem to matter to the wolf inside Remus, who was scaling the walls of its prison, howling for freedom. "It's close," Remus whispered to Peter as they pressed through the heavy thicket, probably announcing their arrival to every creature nearby. There was another heartbeat, not very far away, and that sounded frightened too. A few steps more, and Remus could hear laboured breathing, like someone who'd been struggling for a while now, and was beginning to tire. Closer still, and he could smell the sweat and the rage from this struggle. It was such a strong mix of emotions and energy that Remus was momentarily lost in the fog of it, too overwhelmed to see a clear direction. Then it changed, stilled suddenly. A harsh voice rang out, shattering the quiet of the woods, shaking birds from their nests. "Remus Lupin." Peter gave out a sharp squeak of terror before leaping a foot in the air, transforming and turning tail, scampering away from Remus. No matter. Remus stood taller. "I'm here," he whispered back. "Come to me." That tugging sensation returned to Remus's chest, and he followed it, letting himself be drawn forward through a small clearing of trees. At its centre was an ancient yew, gnarled and creaking, and bound to the trunk was a young man. The dryad had tied him in place with miles of cruel, twisted bramble. The thorns were cutting into his worn leather cloak and puncturing the skin on his neck. His arms were at his sides, and despite obvious attempts to free himself, the brown brambles held firm. He wasn't struggling now, though. He was just staring at Remus, head bent forward, eyes dark and inscrutable. His head was shaved, as Livia's had been, and his clothes were weather-worn and threadbare. But the resemblance ended there. He was tall as Remus, and perhaps only a few years older. His skin was as dark as tanned leather, his features handsome and striking. He smiled slowly, showing rows of straight white teeth. "Remus Lupin. Set me free." "Who are you?" Remus held back, gripping his wand inside his pocket. "I am Castor. Set me free. I am your brother." Remus cocked his head. This man was trapped, utterly at Remus's mercy. He felt his courage returning. "My brother, are you? Greyback sent you?" "Yes." "Well." Remus leaned against the nearest tree and folded his arms. "You're going to have to give me a decent reason for me to set you free then, aren't you?" Castor roared furiously, fighting against his bonds once more, tearing his clothes and driving the thorns deeper into his neck. He was clearly very strong, with a broad build, thick biceps flexing against the vines. "Oh dear," Remus tutted, conversationally. "Looks like you're not going anywhere without me." He would later wonder where this ridiculous sense of cockiness had come from. After all, the situation Remus found himself in was every bit as dangerous as the attack on Diagon Alley, which had turned his mind inside out. Perhaps it was the woods, and the power he could feel coursing through him. Perhaps it was Grant's voice still ringing in his ears. Perhaps it was simply the familiarity of the situation. Remus had been facing off against bullies who thought they had him figured out since he was 6 years old. "So," he said, smiling. "Want to talk?" "I was sent to talk." "Really? Just talk?" "Just talk. Set me free." Remus played with the tip of his wand thoughtfully, as if he didn't have a care in the world. "See, I've got a bit of a problem believing you, Castor, mate. Seeing as the last time Greyback sent someone just to talk to me, an innocent woman ended up dead." "My father recognises his mistake in sending Livia," the werewolf said earnestly. He had calmed down a bit now, and was clearly watching Remus to see where this was going. "So this time, he has sent me." "I can see right through that though too, you know," Remus mused. "Thought a good-looking bloke might pique me interest, did he?" Castor kept staring at him, eyes narrowing. Remus shrugged and continued. "I mean, I'm flattered, Castor, don't get me wrong. I'm sure you're lovely, but I'm still not interested. And I have to say, so far, I'm not very impressed. Not as good at magic as your pal Livia then. She'd evaporated right out of that, no trouble."
"That tree bitch,"
Castor snarled, struggling again.
"Whatever she's done, these vines, I can't use magic."
"Oh, I see." Remus nodded. "Well, must remember to thank her next time I see her."
"Livia told me about you," Castor said. "She said you're Dumbledore's pet hound, Toothless. Wouldn't hurt a fly. Wouldn't chase a rabbit on a full moon."
"I'm nobody's pet," Remus replied, his jaw clenching. "And nor should you be. What's so great about Greyback? What do you lot think is going to happen when we defeat Voldemort?"
"The same thing that always happens to our kind," Castor replied, giving Remus a pitying look. "We will be hunted and oppressed."
"Don't you want to change that?" Remus implored, taking a step forward. "Don't you have a family in the real world? Don't you want a family one day?"
"We are a pack. We are everything."
Remus sighed. "You don't understand. He's lying to you. I know there's a way to make things better, to really change the way we're treated, but it can't be like this, don't you see?" Castor sneered at him disdainfully.
"Just as Livia said. Toothless. Told father you weren't ready. Told him it was too soon."
"Too soon for what?"
"For the big night, of course."
Castor was smiling again, a sinister grin, which made Remus feel very queasy. The werewolf continued, recognising Remus's uncertainty.
"On the night of the next moon, the pack will be on the hunt. It will be a hunt such as the world has not seen since the Dark Ages.
Why are you telling me this?
There was a quaver on Remus's voice now, as much as he tried to disguise it.
You know I'm going straight to Dumbledore.
Castor laughed, a breathless, hollow sound coming from deep in his chest.
Perfect.
Crack. Remus winced as the air around them shimmered slightly, and he staggered back from the figure who had appeared between them in the clearing. She hissed, low under her breath, steely eyes flicking from Remus to Castor. Livia.
Sister!
Castor rasped, straining for freedom once more. Release me!
You have failed our father, she replied. Punishment awaits.
No, Castor protested. It was the dryad. I could not. Livia raised a hand, and Castor was silenced, unable to move or make a sound. Remus's insides froze as she turned on him.
Hello, my love. Are you ready?
Remus pulled out his wand and pointed it at her, assuming a dueling stance and rooting himself into the ground. She would not hold him this time. This time he knew what to expect.
I'm not going anywhere, Livia.
There isn't time for this. The moon approaches, she tutted, walking towards him, as ragged and filthy and wild as he remembered her. Drop that silly stick. She raised a hand and twisted it mid-air, as if she was turning a doorknob. Remus felt the strength of it, prying his fingers apart, his wand burning in his hands. But this time he did not drop it. He clenched his teeth and gathered every ounce of magic from the woods around him.
No.
Remus Lupin, she growled. You will come with us. She raised both arms now and flicked her fingers so that they fanned out from her palms. The trees surrounding Remus caught light in an instant, from trunk to branches, blazing columns of fire roaring around him. He was terrified, but he was not letting go.
No,
he repeated, stepping backwards slowly. He would run if he had to. Let the dryads deal with them. Let the centaurs do it, come to that. You didn't just show up in a forest like this and start burning it down. Livia snapped her fingers then, and at once Castor was freed from his bondage, gasping, snarling. He joined his packmate, and now there were two of them, their eyes glowing like hot coals, reflecting back the flames surrounding them. The time has come, Remus Lupin, they said in unison as black smoke began to fill the air, the scent of sap and pine fizzling around them.
No,
he said again, though he could see no way out now. Mordio! He shouted, aiming his wand at them as he backed away. Castor recoiled, growling, but Livia laughed throatily and waved her hand again, dismissing the curse as if it was no more than a cobweb. This was it. They were going to take him, God knows where, and make him one of them. He would never see his friends again, never see Sirius again. He had been such an idiot, forcing them to stay behind. Now there was nobody left to protect him. There's you. Remus didn't recognise this voice. It wasn't Grant's, or anyone he'd spoken to before. Maybe it was right. There was a spell he hadn't considered, simply because he had never mastered it properly. But he was in dire straits now, and he had more power than ever before at his disposal. As bright embers and burning leaves rained down on the three of them, Remus gathered all of his resources, his strength, and his rage, and every joy in his heart. He would have to be ready to run as soon as the incantation was spoken. If it failed, he would have no time at all to make his escape. He breathed in carefully, and, just before he cast the spell, recalled Sirius's eyes, and Sirius's mouth, and Sirius grinning. I'm mental about you. Expecto Patronum! He practically screamed it, extending his arm, directing his wand as an enormous silver animal burst forth, leaping towards Livia and Castor, huge jaws wide, claws bared. In the split second before he began to run, Remus saw them both cover their eyes and turn to run in the opposite direction as the great beast lunged at them. But there wasn't any time to stay and enjoy his success, so he didn't. He ran again, for the edge of the woods, back to Hogsmeade, back into the wizarding world, and his friends. Remus ran so hard that his legs were burning, and the pain in his hip was like a spear in his side, but he did not stop, lungs full of wood smoke and eyes watering. He just kept going until the trees began to thin and the light grew stronger. Peter and Sirius were still there. Sirius was pacing erratically back and forth on the footpath. Peter was sitting on the ground with his knees drawn up, staring at the woods. He looked as though he'd been crying. Remus staggered out into the daylight and felt ready to collapse right there. Peter stood up, wiping his eyes in disbelief, and Sirius ran towards him, then stopped suddenly, and was knocked back as though he'd hit a wall. Furious, he gave out an angry grunt. Remus allowed one of the knots inside him to unravel, and the barrier was lifted. He limped towards his two friends, wheezing. "Sorry," he murmured. Much to his surprise, Sirius threw his arms around his neck and held him tightly. His heartbeat thrummed against Remus's, and he hugged him back, exhausted and grateful. We couldn't come and help," Sirius said, his voice hoarse and hollow. "Whatever we did, we couldn't follow you." "I'm sorry," Remus said again. "I'm so sorry, Remus," Peter suddenly burst out, his eyes filling with tears. "I'm so sorry." "It's okay." Remus reached out an arm to pat his shoulder, but Sirius wouldn't let him go. Finally, Remus came back to his senses and gently untangled himself. "I have to see Dumbledore right now. Where are the others?" "They had to go back," Sirius explained. "Curfew. They said they'd tell McGonagall." "Good," Remus nodded. "Come on, we have to go, now." He began to hobble towards the village. "Moony, are you okay?" Sirius hurried alongside him, an arm under his shoulder for support. "Just tired," Remus said. "You're covered in... is that soot?" "There was a fire." "Wormtail said something was summoning you." I can't explain it. Please don't ask me." "Fine." There was a cold edge to Sirius's voice, which Remus didn't like, but he kept supporting him, and he kept going, so it would have to be ignored for now, one thing at a time. McGonagall was waiting for them at the school gates, her arms folded, deep lines creasing her forehead. Professor, Remus spluttered, still coughing up smoke. I'm sorry we missed the curfew, but I need to see the headmister right... Yes, of course, Mr. Lupin. Come with me. McGonagall nodded quickly, and took his arm from Sirius. She peered down at Sirius and Peter. You two go to the tower and say nothing. I don't want any arguments, do you hear me? The two young men were so surprised by these sharp instructions that they both nodded and left immediately, Sirius throwing one glance back at Remus. He told Dumbledore almost everything. He told him about the scent, the dryad, and Castor, about the fire, and the plans Greyback had for his pack, and Livia. He did not mention the barrier he had somehow conjured to keep his friends back, nor did he explain that he had known how dangerous it would be, or that he had ignored every ounce of good sense he had in order to pursue Castor. Dumbledore seemed pleased, nonetheless. Everything you have told me is immensely useful, Remus, the old man said, smiling across his desk at Remus, with eyes twinkling with pride, for the first time Remus could remember. You are very brave, and fulfilled your task admirably. I did, even though I went into the Forbidden Forest. You followed your quarry. I don't see that any harm has come to you. You are clearly a formidable wizard, like your father. Remus felt a very small twinge of pleasure at that, which put him more at ease. This attack, though, the hunt they're planning. Let the Order deal with that. Dumbledore shook his head, placing his hands on his desk and rising to his feet. You have done quite enough, more than anyone could expect of a 17-year-old wizard. Yeah, but if I am sorry I asked this of you, Remus. Dumbledore came around his desk and placed a friendly hand on his shoulder. I hope I will not have to ask again.
I'm on your side, Remus replied, feeling he ought to reiterate this. I'll do what has to be done. Dumbledore's eyes glittered with triumph, and his grip tightened on Remus's shoulder. The fire had been put out by the naiads, according to McGonagall, who walked him from Dumbledore's office to the infirmary. There had been no trace of Livia or Castor, and it was assumed that they had apparated. Madame Pomfrey tutted over him, cleaning off the soot, and administered a pain-killing draught. By then he was breathing normally again, and Persephone quite fancied a cigarette, though he didn't tell her that. Food was brought to him there, because by this time he had missed dinner. He ate a pleasant, quiet supper in Madame Pomfrey's homely little office. Thankfully, he was permitted to walk back to Gryffindor Tower alone. His friends were all waiting, not in their usual place by the fire, but in a quieter one, near one of the far windows. They were all speaking in serious, hushed tones, and their heads turned at once to face him as he appeared through the portrait hole. He walked over, a bit woozy from the draught he'd taken, and they made room for him to sit in the window seat, squashed between Lily and Sirius, who quickly squeezed his hand before letting go. They all stared at him and waited for him to speak. So he did. He told them as much as he could, and a few things he hadn't said to Dumbledore. Peter had luckily already covered the dryad, and apparently the marauders had spent much of their evening explaining the animagus secret to Lily. Still, she covered her mouth in horror when Remus talked about encountering Castor, and Livia's incredible powers, and the fire. Sirius was practically quaking with rage beside him, but held his tongue the whole time, and let Remus finish. "Bloody hell," James said, once the story was told. "Well done on the Patronus, though, mate." "Thanks." Remus blushed slightly. Trust James to find something praiseworthy in all of that. "Did you see what it was?" "No," he said quickly. "It happened too fast." Not long afterwards, they all trailed up to bed, one at a time, each of them with their faces set in a determined mask. Remus realised that he was not the only one who had a very trying day. He took a quick shower to get the last of the forest off him, and brushed his teeth without looking in the mirror, too afraid of what he might see there. Sirius still hadn't tried to talk to him, or confront him about the terrible betrayal back at the forest edge. But Remus was certain that this was yet to come, and though he knew it would be hard, he looked forward to clearing the air. For hours he lay in bed, waiting and hoping. Sirius always came to him, on a night like this, if something had happened. Sirius always knew when Remus needed to talk, even when Remus didn't want to. Sirius could get it out of him, and make everything right again. Remus waited for a long time. "Come on," he thought to himself. "I need you. Where are you?" "He ain't a mind reader, sweetheart." Grant's chirpy voice broke through once more. "He knows me, though." "Oh yeah, you ever told him that?" Remus declined to answer, because it was no longer necessary. Working through problems in your head, using imaginary role-play, was all well and good. But that's what he'd done when he'd felt the most alone, when he thought he had no one else to turn to. He realised, with a sickening sense of shame, just how stupid he'd been. Without wasting another moment, he slid out of bed and crossed the floor. He parted Sirius's bed curtains and whispered into the darkness. "Sirius?" "What?" Sirius was lying on his back too, hands folded over his middle, like a tombstone effigy. His coldness made Remus flinch, but he swallowed his pride. "I need you." Sirius turned his head at once. He sighed and pulled back the covers. "Get in." Remus scrambled inside eagerly. They lay next to each other, on their sides, staring at each other. "Do you hate me?" Remus asked. "No," Sirius replied, voice still empty. "I'm really sorry. I wanted to protect you all." "I know. That's what James said." Sirius's voice had melted slightly, and was now more petulant than angry. "But it's no excuse," Remus continued. I wasn't myself. Do you understand?" Sirius shrugged, moving the bedsheet so that they slid off his shoulder, exposing his collarbone. Remus tried not to get too distracted by that, and licked his lips, meeting Sirius's eye again. I'll tell you everything, he said. You told us, Sirius replied, tetchily. Not everything, Remus replied. There are things I don't want everyone to know about, but I want you to know, if that's okay. Sirius stared at him as if he couldn't believe his ears. A small smile was creeping onto his face, and he was obviously trying to suppress it. Go on, then. So he did. He told him every feeling he'd had, the irresistible pull in the forest, the rugged power of natural magic, the terrible guilt. By the time he'd stopped speaking, he realised that Sirius had reached out to him and was stroking his arm gently, back and forth, to comfort him. What made you think of casting a patronus? Remus snorted lightly. It's stupid. A voice in my head. Ah. Not like the normal ones, though. Usually it's someone I know. Maybe this time it was just you. Remus thought about this. It made him feel funny. Sirius was still watching him, still stroking his arm. Remus remembered something else. It's a wolf, my patronus. I didn't want the others to know. I don't want them to think. They'd never think badly of you, Moony. They know you too well. Do they, though? After today, I just feel so stupid. I got so caught up. I didn't know what to do. I just kept getting in deeper and deeper. But you did the right thing in the end, Sirius said firmly, gripping him now. That's all that matters. He leaned forward and kissed Remus gently on the lips, a calming gesture. You came back to us. Remus looked down, lowering his voice to a bare whisper. He looked up at Sirius again, meeting those perfect blue eyes. I came back to you. Sirius kissed him again, harder, and did not stop for a long while. End of chapter 130.